Hey, welcome back everyone, and thank you for joining me once again in Manny's School of Art as we continue our series on working with charcoal. This is part 3, and today's video we're going to be looking at how to work with the white charcoal or the white pastels to create a very simple drawing of a rose onto a black surface, just like this. Okay. As a bonus, we're going to be looking at how to make a very simple carbon paper that you can use to transfer your images from white paper onto a dark surface. I'm also going to discuss a little bit of the characteristics of white pastels, and then we'll move on to the main demonstration. So if you like what you're seeing, please like and share, and don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to the channel so we can continue to bring you these type of videos. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you. Making your own carbon paper is actually very easy. All you need is a stick of pastel. I like to use a light color because we're going to be working on black paper. And then you want to make sure that you completely rub this in. Now take a soft tissue and work it into the paper so that you have a nice even coating. And you want to remove any extra chalk. All right, let's get right into the lesson. So all you need is a white charcoal pencil or a white pastel pencil, some blending stumps, a kneaded eraser, black paper. If you're using the transfer paper that I showed you, you can use that, and then your image. Now make sure that you have white charcoal or white pastel. If you use white colored pencils, these are wax based. So even though you can write and you can do some things with the black paper, you're never going to get this really white, right? Because it's kind of a translucent color and it's got wax in it, and it starts to get really shiny, and then it won't pick up any more of the white. Okay, so make sure it's pastel and not a white color pencil. The first thing we want to do is we want to transfer our image onto the black paper. There's 3 ways of doing it. The first way, you can take your image and take a piece of white pastel or a light color pastel, fill up the back here so that when you flip it over, you can transfer it, okay? If you're gonna do that, I would recommend that you make multiple prints of your image before you do that, because these, it's a one and done. The second way is you can take the paper that we made a little while ago and use that as carbon paper to transfer this image onto the black. And then of course, the third way is for you to directly draw onto the surface here, okay? For the purpose of this video, we're just gonna use this here to transfer it. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place this here, make sure that the blue side is down, and I'm going to put my rose directly on it. All right, get this exactly where you want it, and you want to tape it down on the top. The tape will act like a hinge so that you can lift up the drawing without messing up the registration. Okay. Next thing, take a ballpoint pen and start going over your lines. Press kind of firm so that basically what you're doing is you're pressing this through the carbon paper and creating an image on here, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and then I'll be back to show you what it looks like. Don't take the tape off until everything is completely done to make sure, because that's how you re-register it, right? So you lift this up, you check it, and if it's not done, you just pop it back down and it'll re-register itself. You continue your work. All right, I think I have everything done, but let's take a look before we remove the tape. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this out of the way, and you can see, zoom in a little bit. You can see that the image has been transferred very neatly, very nicely. And there's a little bit of residue around here. You can just wipe that off with the kneaded eraser, right? Because it's just that blue pastel. So pretty much this is ready to go. before we start adding the pastels onto the rose, let's take a look at some of the characteristics of the white pastel. Basically, the pastel is nothing more than a white pigment with a binder. So it acts very much like the charcoal that we were working on the last project. Okay, so when you start working, you start building this up, and just like with the white charcoal, you can blend. Okay, so I've got some nice clean pastel or the tortillas, and you can see that it blends very, very easily. You can use your fingers, so if you wanted to use your fingers, you can. I don't use my fingers a whole lot because I don't like the oil from my fingers mixing with the pastels or with the charcoal or graphite. So I go through a lot of these, and they're very cheap. You can build things up. So like here, you can see we have a dark area, then it's starting to look gray, then a little bit brighter. You can always add more on top. Okay, so if I needed to make this brighter, I can just simply go back and add more of the pastel. So the big difference is that when we are working on a white sheet of paper and we're doing a value drawing, we're building up our shadows, right? But when you are working on a black sheet of paper with white pastels, you're actually building up your highlights. So everything's going to be done in reverse. So a little example here, if I was drawing a ball and the light source was coming from this side, I would actually be building up this side. And I would start off very lightly. And then I could blend if I wanted to. Now, if you like the texture of the paper and you want to leave it instead of blending, that is perfectly fine. And then you can continue to build that up. And then like fade these into each other, just like we did with the graphite. Or not the graphite, but the charcoal last week. And just like with the charcoal, because this is a pastel, you can lift it using the kneaded eraser if you need an area to appear darker, right? So in this case, we're erasing to make things darker, and we're working with our pastel to make things lighter. Okay, so the exact opposite of what we normally do with regular pencils or charcoal pencils. So now that we have that kind of established how this is going to work, we are ready to start adding our highlights. Okay, so just like anything else, when you're working with a value drawing, you need to establish where you want the light source to come from. So I think on this one, I'm going to have the light source come in from here, just like so. Okay, that's important because remember what we're actually doing is we're actually building up the highlights. Okay, and we need to figure out where the shadows are going to be so that we can leave those areas nice and dark. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to pick a petal to start. I'm going to start right here. This right here, to me, is going to be nice and bright because it's going to be receiving lots of light. Okay, right in this area right here. And remember, this is kind of more like painting, in my opinion. Okay. So I'm thinking about like how to build up my values gradually, and then kind of pulling and pushing the shadows and the highlights. So I do want to make mine kind of soft. So the first layer that I put down, I do want to blend it in a little bit or push it into the paper, right into the pores of the paper. Now over here it needs to stay dark, so I'm not doing a whole lot. Okay. Then this area here, which is the part that's closest to the highlight, to the light source needs to be even brighter. So I'm going to start really brightening this up. And I'm pressing firmly. And then I'm going to fade it into that midtone. And I'm going to leave it like that. I actually want some of that texture to show through, and I want to see the midtones underneath. Okay. So now I'm going to move on to the next one. Right here, we have a midtone, and I want to create a barrier here. So I'm thinking that the light's going to strike here, and then as it comes this way, it's going to get a little bit darker. Now I'm going to come over here and fade this out. Remember that these are pastels, so don't swipe at it with your hand and don't use a brush or anything. You just blow on it, tap it, but don't swipe at it. And remember, when we are done, we have to spray this. Otherwise, if somebody touches it, it's going to ruin it. Okay? Okay, now let's do a bigger area. Let's do this little area here in combination with this. So this petal here, I'm going to outline it just a little bit. It's going to cast a shadow here. So I'm thinking that this area here is going to stay dark, and then this area here will have a little bit of light, and then this area up here will be the brightest. Okay. So again, I'm going to start off lightly putting in my first layer and blending it in. Like so. And then, boom, right here, it's going to be bright. Nice and rich and bright, really, really bright. When I do the bright ones, I try not to touch them too much because I really want those to stay like as white as I can possibly get them. And if you touch them, it's like this. I only touch where the white meets the medium. I try not to touch the white itself when I want a pure bright. Okay. Now down here, I'm sure that there's going to be a little bit of light that gets right here, but it's not going to be really bright, right? Because it's part of it is being blocked. And then this area here needs to stay in shadow, right? Because I'm thinking that this petal is going to cast a shadow. Now, it might be, you might have to adjust it. And if you accidentally put something where you don't want it, remember that you can use your kneaded eraser to remove. Now I'm going to put, this area here is probably going to be dark, and this part here, it's going to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to come over here. And I'm going to start working. This petal is curling. So I'm going to start curling this. And as it goes down, it's going to get darker, right? So when I blend, I also want to curl. So that goes back to the use of cross contours. And over here, it's going to curl in this direction. Now you'll notice I didn't put any graphite, or excuse me, any pastel over here. Because this is going to be slightly darker, I can use the pastel that's already on my blending stump, right? That way I don't make it too bright. And then I'm thinking, since the light's here, right here is the apex of that curl. So the highlight will not be on the end, in my opinion. It has to be right here. So when you're doing this, really try to imagine where the light is going to hit and make those areas strong. And then fade it into your deepest shadows. And remember, your deepest shadows in this case is the paper, right? Because we're using black paper, okay? Now, right here, I don't want to see this outline, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fade that outline into the drawing, because we really don't see outlines when we look at the world around us. We see contrast, okay? So yes, I know that we have to start off most of the time by doing the line drawing, but in reality, if you want this to look real, you don't want to see the outlines when you're done. So I'm going to keep building this up. The process is exactly the same. Make sure that you treat each petal individually, and then figure out what the light and what the shadow would be doing for each one of the petals. And that's it. Okay, this is really an exercise on working with building up highlights, which is the exact opposite of what we typically do when we draw on white paper. All right, so this is what it will look like more or less when you're done. Okay, so the light source is over here. You can see that this entire side of the rose is much brighter than this side over here. However, if you want to make changes, you're going to be working with your kneaded eraser, your blending stump, and your white pencil to make whatever adjustment. So for example, I feel like this here needs to be just a little bit darker. So all I need to do to create a darker area is you use my kneaded eraser to remove some of the pastel and then reblend this edge right here, just like so. Okay. If you decide that you want something to be brighter, you simply go over it with the pastel, and then, like I said, just kind of blend the edges a little bit. Unless you're if you're doing something that has a lot of like reflections, then you can leave some hard lines. But usually when it's something soft, you're gonna want to soften up the edges. Now I feel like that shadow is a little bit too uniform, so I went ahead and thin up this side, but I'm gonna leave that side a little bit whiter. Okay. And then on the left side, I'm not gonna make the highlights quite as bright, right? Because since the light source is on the right, not as much light will get to the left side. Okay. And you just go through and you make your adjustments before you spray it. Okay. Now, once you spray it, let's say that you want to do some additional detail work, and it's hard to do when the charcoal is so movable. You can spray this, let it dry, and then go back and add more layers. Okay? For today's, we don't really need to do that. I'm just gonna go ahead and finish this out, like so. Make sure everything is nice and clean. If I wanted to do stuff in the background, I could, but I'm not for the demo. And then the important thing is, once I'm satisfied with the drawing, I would take it, spray it thoroughly to protect it. Because right now this is it's not protected. So if you touch it or you rub it, it's going to blend. It's going to smush. It's going to get messy. So that's pretty much it. Remember that the big thing is you're still working with a pastel type of product, or a charcoal type of product, I guess they call it, right? White charcoal, white pastels. So the techniques that you learn with the black pastel or with the black charcoal still apply. Okay? So the only difference is that instead of working and adding your shadows, you're actually building your highlights, okay? On the next one, we are going to be working with a tone paper, and we're going to be adding both highlights and shadows. And we're going to use the color of the paper as our midtones, okay? So I hope you tune in for that, and I will see you next time.